Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gautama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Okay, welcome back from lunch, everyone. Nice to see you guys. We're going to start off our afternoon with some meditation. And just like yesterday, we'll just do chanting and go right into meditation. I'm not going to do guidance in the afternoon, just to give you guys a chance to meditate with guidance in the morning, and then in the afternoon, no need to have some guidance, give you guys a chance to build up your practice that way. So we'll go into meditation with chanting and come out with chanting. And then afterwards, I'm going to share with you guys the 10 Fetters, helping you guys to learn about how to eradicate these pollutions out of the mind. So if you'd like to join for meditation, you're more than welcome. And you can use the seated, lying, standing, and there's even walking. If you'd like to do walking meditation, feel free. Okay? Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Otang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาพุทธังมหาเกวันนังอภิวาเทมิ สวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมมุโนสักขะโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามานุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ If you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Okay, so this afternoon we're going to be focusing on the 10 fetters and eradicating these pollutions of the mind. I'm going to be going through each individual fetter, just explaining a little bit about what it is, and then explaining how to eliminate it from the mind. And as we go, feel free to ask any questions, because just like I shared yesterday, I'm teaching to a certain level of detail, and then I'm just waiting for you guys to decide what it is you would like to know more about. Rather than tell you everything I know about any one particular fetter, I'm just going to teach you to a certain level of detail, and then as you guys would like to know more, you can ask more. Okay, so here's the 10 fetters, which is what we were looking at just before lunch, that there's the lower fetters and then there's the higher fetters. I'm going to go through each one of these individually, and as you're eliminating these fetters, you're working to eliminate each of the individual fetters. The mind's moving through these 4 stages of enlightenment, like we were talking about prior to lunch. Okay, so now we're going to talk about personal existence view to get us started. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, so I'm not sure how much of it you guys need me to go into, but essentially what personal existence view is where the mind is holding on to the self-image and the self-identity, thinking that this is who you are. The mind's clinging, thinking that this body and or the mind is you. The mind's confused. It thinks that this is who you are as a person. So it's not to say that there isn't an existence or there isn't a person here. It's just saying that this isn't who you are. Because as soon as you cling to this body, thinking that this is who you are, now when you start experiencing change, the mind is, discontent. It's frustrated because it's holding on and clinging to have maybe permanent youthfulness, or to have a certain type of hair, or a certain type of skin, or something like this. But when you start experiencing all this change with the physical body, if your mind's clinging and holding on to this craving permanence, now your mind's going to be discontent. And the same thing is true with the self-identity. If there's anything that the mind's holding on to, that I am this particular thing, you're not going to be that thing permanently. So therefore, when things start changing, you will be discontent. You will feel sometimes lost in the world. This is where, like, if you've spilled something on your clothing in a social situation and you've been embarrassed, this is because of personal existence view. If you saw a wrinkle or a pimple or a mole or a gray hair, or you got a little fat here or there, and you were shaken up by that, this is personal existence view. If you've been standing in the mirror at different times in your life and checking out your hair and just making sure every hair is exactly right before you go out into the world, this is personal existence view. If you have ever been in a relationship where you had a boyfriend or girlfriend and you identified with, I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend, I am a husband, I am a wife. When you guys separated, you might have really struggled during that period of time because your identity wasn't intact anymore. The mind was craving and clinging and holding on to this identity of I am a boyfriend or I am a girlfriend. And now when you're single, the mind doesn't like this and you don't feel quite whole. And you might have wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship. Or if you've had a certain job or occupation and you identified with this as who you are, when you stop doing that job or occupation, you might have struggled during that period of time. Or if you identify with a certain nationality or a certain sexual orientation and you hear somebody saying something either agreeable or disagreeable about these things, you can have your personal existence view triggered where now you don't feel comfortable. I even had a student one time tell me that they considered themselves a great tipper. They said, I am a great tipper. And now when they started going into restaurants and the restaurants were showing them a computer screen and having them pick a certain amount of tip, they felt conflicted because some of these places they went, they were just ordering a cup of coffee. It was like a 30-second conversation and they got a cup of coffee and they were being approached with, hey, we want you to tip us. And he was choosing not to tip. And he felt conflicted about this because he says, I am a great tipper. And now in this situation where he wasn't tipping, he felt lost and he felt confused and he felt bewildered because he wasn't tipping. He felt, less of a person in this situation. So your mind can cling to any number of things for an identity. And if you're identifying with I am a certain nationality or I am a certain ethnicity or I am a certain sexual orientation, now when you hear things that are either agreeable or disagreeable related to that, you'll be shaken up by it. So by getting rid of this personal existence view, the mind can become peaceful and joyful. There's other fetters you need to eliminate too, but as long as this one is in place, anytime somebody says something about this body or this mind, you will end up experiencing struggles and difficulties. So I summarize this as the personal existence view. That's what the Buddha describes it as. And I talk about self-image and self-identity. But in reality, there's 5 aggregates here that the mind can potentially cling to. There's the physical form, which is the self-image. There is the feelings, certain feelings. You might say, I am angry, or I am sad, or I am frustrated. You can cling to your feelings and see that as part of your identity and who you are. Or I am a shy person, right? You might think that way. Or I am an introvert, or I am an extrovert, right? You can cling to these kinds of things, your feelings. Then there's certain perceptions. Perceptions are your views and opinions about the world. You might cling to this as who you are. Like, I am a liberal, I am a Democrat, I am a Republican. I don't know all your political systems where you're from, but this is from America that I'm familiar with, right? Like, I am pro this, or I am anti this. You can identify with this as your perception, your views and opinions about how things should be done in the world. You can cling to your choices and decisions. If you've made certain choices and decisions in the past, you might cling to this as who you are. Like maybe if we used substances that cause heedlessness, or if we did sexual misconduct in the past, we might feel like less of a person. In fact, some of the places we go to help get free of these things even reinforce this. Like if you go to like a AA or NA meeting, usually you're taught to say, I am an alcoholic, or I am an addict, or something like this. And the mind is being taught to identify with this as who you are as a person. And the reason why this is happening in these meetings is because they're trying to help you understand that you can't ever go back to these substances. But when you identify with your past decisions as who you are as a person, this is where you can really struggle. Because while I might have used drugs or alcohol in the past, that doesn't define who I am as a person today. Those were unwise choices that I made, but that doesn't mean I have to define myself through those unwise choices. So when we grasp onto this I am, related to our decisions, then our personal existence view is there and the mind is polluted by this, and now you can feel diminished and less of a person because of it. And then the same thing with the consciousness or the mind. This is the self-identity. So these are the 5 aggregates. These are the 5 things that you have that you may not be aware of that your mind can potentially cling to. The physical form, the feelings, your perceptions, your volitional formations or your choices and decisions, in your consciousness, your mind itself. So you need to train your mind to disassociate with this and separate from this, realizing that this doesn't make up who you are as a person. So this is some of the things. I have a couple of pages here of things that you can be doing in order to implement these proactive things to help you to eradicate this pollution of personal existence view. All the things that I'm going to share with you on this fetter and the other fetters, you wouldn't be able to just implement these by themselves. You would need to have the Eightfold Path underway. That's why I taught the Eightfold Path on the first day, and that's why I teach it in all the other classes, because that's the foundational teaching. You need to get that well underway. And now when the mind's starting to experience the jhanas, that's when you start pivoting and you start focusing on a lot of these things. So for personal existence view, you can receive guidance on how to use the meditation to realize non-self, which is what I'm going to teach you in this course. This is one of the proactive things that you can be doing to eradicate personal existence view, but that wouldn't be effective if you weren't already developing your breathing mindfulness meditation and already have that well underway for probably a good 6 months, a year, even a year and a half, 2 years before you start practicing this meditation to realize non-self. If you just started doing that, it's not going to have the same impact as if you have a well-developed life practice of the Eightfold Path with breathing mindfulness meditation, generosity, and everything else. So you would like to go in and start using this meditation when it's the appropriate time for you. Then you can change the language, like I was talking a little bit about yesterday, that you can change how your mind speaks, right? Because how you speak and how you represent things through spoken words is how your mind thinks. So as long as you keep saying like, I am angry, or I am frustrated, or I am hungry, or things like this, your mind's going to keep associating with these feelings as being you, or this body as being you. So whether you say this out loud to other people or not is up to you, but I encourage you to think in terms of the body needs food instead of I am hungry, because this isn't true reality. I am not really hungry. It's just that the body needs food. And you can use these kinds of things and others to disassociate with this body as being who you are. So instead of I am angry, the mind is experiencing anger. That's what's truly happening, is the mind is experiencing anger. That mind isn't you. It's not who you are, but it's experiencing anger. And this can help you to see that the body is one thing, the mind's another thing, and then there's this person. And the person needs to train the mind. So you can disassociate with this personal existence view and this idea of a self by changing your language. Instead of thinking my phone or my computer or my job or my home or my car, you can think of the phone. Instead of saying, can you hand me my phone? Can you hand me the phone? I need to go to my house, or I'm going to go to my job. You're going to the job. It's not mine. It doesn't belong to me. This phone, I'm just kind of renting it. Even though I purchased it at a store, it's not permanent. So it can't be mine. If it was mine, it would be permanent, and I'd be able to keep it permanently. But I can't. It's impermanent. So it's not mine. It doesn't really truly belong to me. So this is the way to disassociate with any particular material object as being mine. If you're going to do this when you're talking with people, probably a good 90-95% of the time you can speak this way, and it'll actually will work for you better. Like when you're talking with people, if you're like, can you hand me my phone? It can kind of come off like really harsh and a little bit aggressive. And you'll see that you'll be able to practice the 5 factors of well-spoken speech better when you say, would you mind handing me the phone? And you'll see that people will respond to you better this way. But there's some situations where it's not possible to really use this type of practice and sound like a normal human being. Like I use the example of my son, right? I need to say, this is my son. Otherwise, it's like, this is the being that I contributed sperm to 12 years ago, right? Or 13 years ago. And people would be like, what is he talking about? This guy is weird. I don't know if I'm interested in getting to enlightenment or not, right? So you're going to probably 95% of the time you'll be able to speak this way. But every once in a while, you're going to need to say, this is my son, right? But my mind understands he's not mine. He doesn't belong to me. Right? So you're going to be able to do that because this language is really unfitting to fully describe what it is that we're experiencing, which we've got all these things around us. We're doing all these things, but they don't really belong to us. They're not ours. And none of this is me. It's not who I am as a person. But we need to use language so people understand because the vast majority of the world isn't necessarily speaking this way. So 95% of the time you can speak this way. And what you're doing is you're clearing up the confusion. Because what personal existence view is the mind's confused. It's misunderstanding. So you're trying to be very clear and very precise and very concise about what's truly going on here in this world. Is that I am not angry. The mind is experiencing anger. I am not thirsty. The body needs water. That's what's really truly occurring. So getting to enlightenment is to be able to see true reality, and you're going to need to be able to understand that in your mind and then speak that as you might need to speak things in the world. But then, of course, you might ultimately, once you realize non-self, you might revert back to saying, like, I'm going to go get a sweet drink. And at lunch, I was like, I'm going to go get a drink. Would anybody like one, right? So you might just start speaking that way because it's easier to communicate. But your mind understands that there's no I here. There's no me here. That none of this is who I am as a person by the time you switch back. You can develop the perception of impermanence by observing in the world that all these things are impermanent. Because what the mind's trying to do is it's trying to grab on to either the form, feelings, perceptions, choices and decisions, which are volitional formations, or the consciousness is trying to cling to this and it wants it to be permanent. So the more you soak into the mind and you can see everything around you is impermanent, then your mind can be more and more liberated from craving permanence and holding on to this personal existence view. So there were many days and even weeks where I would walk around and I would just look at things and try to see if I could find impermanence. So like walking down the street and seeing a crack in the sidewalk, I'd be like, that's impermanence. Or I'd look at a fence and I'd see the fence, the paint was faded. And I was like, that's impermanence. Or I'd be sitting in my room reading a book or something and I'd hear a baby crying next door. And I'd be like, that's impermanence. It was quiet, but now there's a baby crying. But when the baby's crying, that's impermanent too, because then the baby just stopped crying and it's not crying anymore. That's impermanence. So seeing this constant impermanence in the world around you, soaking that into the mind, the Buddha talks about this regularly in his teachings, to develop the perception of impermanence to eradicate the conceit, I am. You will see this in the words of the Buddha. You can wear simple clothing in order to disassociate with this body as being who you are, because with personal existence view in the mind, you'll go to your closet in the morning or your suitcase or whatever it is, and you'll think in your mind, who am I going to see today? How would I like to look? What clothes do I want to wear in order to look a certain way in front of these people? And then you might rifle through your clothing and pick out that special shirt or those special pants or whatever it is, a special jewelry in order to look a certain way, because the mind is trying to be perceived by others in a certain way. So if you'd like to wear simple clothing, you can do that. This is why the monks wear just a regular simple rag robe. And this is why I wear all white, is it helps you to eradicate the pollution of personal existence view. So you may or may not be interested in going out and purchasing all white clothes or all black clothes or all purple clothes or something like that. So you can accomplish the same thing without having to go out and purchase new clothes. You can take your clothes that you currently have and just create stacks of clothes and just pick off the top. So you can have your shirts and your pants or your shirts and your shorts or whatever it is, and you can just pick off the top of your stack and just wear that. And if you're working, say you work in a formal environment and you have like business clothes, then you have casual clothes, you might need to have two different sections where when you go to work, you just pick off of this clothes. And when you are going to casual things, you pick off the top of this clothes. And you'll be able to see personal existence view really well when you're doing this, because once you stack up your clothes, you're going to see your mind still going to want to grab from the middle of the pile or the bottom of the pile. And that's your personal existence view. And that's where you need to restrain the mind and say, no. I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to take off the top. Because when I started wearing white clothes, my mind was doing this because there were certain white clothes that fit me a little bit better, even though they were all the same. They all were impermanent. So some of them fit me a little bit better. And I'm like, who am I going to see today? Oh, I want to wear this one. And it was the same exact shirt. It just fit me a little bit better. So you're going to see that if you have clothes, that your mind's probably going to grab from the middle or the bottom. So in that situation, don't let it do that. Cut it off and say, no. You're going to pick off the top. So this is how you can implement something like this without going out and buying a whole bunch of new clothes if you'd like. I mean, you can go out and buy a lot of simple clothes if you like, but you don't have to. You can do it this way. You can also eliminate any kind of jewelry that you might wear. If you're used to wearing your favorite rings or your favorite earrings or necklaces or things like this, this is the mind oftentimes just projecting a certain image. And if you go outside and you've forgotten that ring, you're like, oh my goodness, you're like shaken up by it. So what you would like to do is train your mind to be comfortable to go outside and be completely peaceful and joyful with or without your jewelry. Even a watch, if you're used to wearing a watch every day, I bet if you go outside without it, you kind of feel naked and kind of lost, right? And this is what you're trying to eliminate. So it doesn't mean that you never wear jewelry ever in your life. It just means that you would like to train your mind to be able to go outside without these things. So typically when you're making changes like this, your mind doesn't like it. So if you're used to wearing a certain ring or a watch or earrings or things like this, you might need to go out one day with it and one day without it, one day with it, one day without it, and kind of ease the mind into being able to do this. And then eventually do 2 days without it, 1 day with it, 2 days without it, 1 day with it. Gradually do this until you're like 5 or 10 or 20 days without it, 1 day with it, 5, 10, 20, 30 days without it, 1 day with it. You can do it this way. If you're married and your spouse, your partner is used to you wearing a wedding ring and you're taking it off in order to do this, you might be interested to give them a heads up and let them know that you're working on personal existence view. You still love them. The relationship's still intact. Everything's just fine. But you would like to kind of train your mind to be able to go outside without this ring, right? Or some particular thing. So this will help you because these things are all impermanent. You're not going to be able to wear these things permanently anyway. So eventually you're going to have to let them go. And even if you wear them throughout the end of your life, you could potentially lose them. You could get stolen. But ultimately, by the time you die, you're going to have to let go of these things. And it's going to be very painful if you haven't done the work prior to death to be able to let these things go. So if you can let them go for periods of time like this, and then ultimately you might decide to just wear that special necklace because you like wearing it, but you've already been able to see that you can go out with it or you can go without it, and you're completely content and peaceful either way. So you need to show your mind that you can do that. If you never put the mind in that situation, you won't know how you feel when you're outside without it. And eventually you're going to have to let go of it when you die. So you'd like to kind of train your mind to do that now so it's not painful when you're getting closer and closer to death. Because if you're holding on to all these things, as you get closer and closer to death, it's going to be very painful. So you can do this with body decorations. You can do this with makeup. You can do it with perfumes and colognes. A lot of times we wear those kinds of things because we're trying to be perceived in the world a certain way. So you can eliminate perfumes and colognes. Those are all things you can work to eliminate, including hair. Facial hair, head hair, these are all things that you can choose to eliminate if you like. These are all things that I'm suggesting to you, right? This doesn't mean you have to go out tomorrow and cut off all your hair, right? You can actually get to enlightenment without cutting off all of your head hair. But in terms of eradicating personal existence view, the two things that I saw that are most impactful is wearing simple clothes and cutting off your hair. This is why the Buddha did that, because it really accelerates the process of getting rid of personal existence view. Oftentimes for women, it's a lot harder to cut off their head hair. For men, it's oftentimes a lot harder to cut off facial hair. They have challenges with that. And if your mind, like the whole idea of cutting off your facial hair or your head hair just bothers you, that's the whole reason why it's important to do it. because your mind is holding on to this, not wanting to let it go. So the more your mind is uncomfortable with something like that, the more reason why more justification that it's going to actually help you if you choose to do that. I've seen some students that will kind of gradually cut their hair shorter and shorter and shorter over a period of months to be able to get more and more comfortable with that. Again, you don't have to cut off your hair in order to get to enlightenment. There's people who are enlightened who never had to cut off their hair, but you're going to need to accumulate a bunch of these other ones in order to be able to get the mind to eliminate personal existence view. But if you're looking for two things that are the most impactful, it's clothes and cutting off your hair. Whenever you see that the mind is trying to project a personal existence view, you would like to cut that off. Like say you go to a party and it's like, wow, look how great I am, right? And you're like, look, don't I look great today? And that's the personal existence view. Whenever you see the mind wanting to do that, you'd like to cut it off. So anytime you see the mind trying to project a personal existence view, or if the mind is having discontent feelings associated with personal existence view, you'd like to cut it off and let it go. So say you're on a bus and somebody looks at you strange and be like, wow, you're wearing that shirt outside? Are you serious? And you start noticing this frustration rising up, you'd like to cut that off. Or if you're at a restaurant and you hear somebody talking about the nationality, the culture where you come from, or the country where you come from, and you're starting to notice frustration and agitation arise, you got to cut that off. So there's these proactive things that I've been sharing with you so far, but then there's this thing that you do in the moment, that whenever your personal existence view is triggered and you notice discontentedness arising, you cut it off and let it go. That's going to restrain the mind, and more it's going to knock down the pollution until eventually someday you'll be somewhere and somebody will say something about this body or this mind and you won't be discontent. One day I came out of my house and I was walking to the park to play basketball with my son, and my neighbor comes out of their house and they're like, wow, David, you are so fat. I said, yep, sure am, and just walked away, right? I wasn't upset. I wasn't angry. I wasn't frustrated, because he's talking about this body, and this body isn't me. And he's just saying this body is fat. Yeah, you're right. It is. Got a lot of fat there. Yep. No need to be upset. No need to think that he's a bad person or anything like this. He just said that. That was his choice. That was his opinion, right? That was his perception. But I don't need to cling to this body and get all upset about it, because I can't control what other people say. I can't control what other people think. I can't control other people's opinions and views. I can't control those things. All I can do is control my own mind, right? So you can get to the point where you've cut this off so much that someday somebody will say something that would have normally triggered your personal existence view, and you'll see that you can remain completely peaceful and completely joyful, right? Okay, now that was this one and that one. And then the last one is, you're going to need to have multiple conversations like we were having yesterday. You're going to need to have multiple conversations like that, where you understand what is personal existence view, where you understand what the universal truth of non-self is. You're going to need to have multiple conversations like that. So that's why I've integrated it into a lot of these courses and a lot of these retreats, because you can't just usually talk about it once and then get it right away. Out of all the fetters, I can say this one is the most challenging one to understand, and it's one of the most challenging ones to eliminate, and it's the first one. But if you can get over this hump, all the rest of them can be a lot more straightforward, because they're more straightforward to understand and they're more straightforward to eliminate. But this is one of the ones that's the most challenging to understand, because we've been taught our whole life to accumulate personal existence view. In our countries, we have flags, we have national anthems, we have other things. Our countries really want us to identify with I am German, or I am American, or I am Canadian, because now you'll invest in the country, you'll build up this country. So there's a lot of things that go into us adopting personal existence view, because it's good for a country to have a lot of people that really identify with that. Or like a sports team, or something like this, right? If you really identify with the sports team, you'll purchase the merchandise, you'll purchase the season tickets, you'll go to that game, you'll contribute things to that particular experience, right? So there's people that are incentivizing us to have this personal existence view. And that's why it's so challenging to let it go, because it's so ingrained in the mind. Okay, so this is personal existence view. Then there's doubt. This is the second fetter. What doubt is where you have doubt about the teachings of the Buddha and their ability to attain enlightenment. You have doubt about the Buddha. You have doubt about the community. You have doubt about his teachings. You have doubt about maybe your teacher. You have doubt about your own ability to attain enlightenment. This is very common when you come to the path to enlightenment, but it's a pollution because it'll hinder you from being able to get to enlightenment. As long as you have doubt about the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, or your own ability to get to enlightenment, you won't be able to continue to make progress through that. But the way you eliminate doubt is not through faith or belief or anything like this. You eliminate doubt through investigating the teachings, through examining them. Because the more you examine and investigate the teachings, the more you reflect on them to independently verify them, you'll see that they're true. And then the more you practice them and your mind is being transformed and you start experiencing those qualities of the jhanas that we talked about, you'll eliminate your doubt. You'll eventually get to a point where you're not enlightened yet, but you'll have no doubt that these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind because you've seen it. You've seen the truth that you came out of your house, your neighbor said you were fat, you were like, yep, sure am. And you just kept a smile on your face, you kept walking, right? It's no big deal. You didn't even think twice about it, right? You'll know that, hey, these teachings have really worked because you see these accomplishments in terms of your mind, that it's not upset, it's not frustrated. So the way you get to the elimination of doubt is not blind belief or faith or anything like this, but it's through investigation of the teachings. So if you have doubt in your mind about whether the Buddha existed, if you have doubt about his teachings, if you have doubt about this community and our ability and interest to help you, if you have doubt about me, whether I can help you, or doubt about your own ability to get to enlightenment, this is normal. This is what people come to the path to enlightenment with. But what you do is you harness that doubt. You turn it into an inquisitive mind. You roll up the sleeves. You sink your teeth into the teachings. You open up the books. You start reading the books. You start coming to the classes. You start watching the videos and listening to the podcast and asking your teacher questions. And the more that you do that, if you penetrate into it deep enough, you'll see that the teachings lead exactly where the Buddha said they do. He used to tell people, come, examine my teachings. Come, examine, because he knows that they lead to enlightenment. If you examine them close enough, you'll see that to you for yourself. So that's how you eliminate this doubt, is by gaining this confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to attain enlightenment. And as you're seeing the condition to your mind improving, getting into the jhanas, that's where the confidence is really starting to build as you're experiencing the jhanas. And that's why you need to eliminate doubt before the mind gets into the first stage of enlightenment. And that's why by the time you eliminate doubt, getting into the first stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment because you've eliminated your doubt. By that point, you know that these teachings lead to enlightenment. You're not enlightened yet, but you don't have any doubts whatsoever. And that's why by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you are going to get to enlightenment. It's just a matter of time. Okay, so this is doubt. Then we have the third fetter, which is wrong behavior and observances. There's two aspects to this fetter. I'll describe both of them. The first part, wrong behavior. This is the unwholesome moral conduct that the mind has related to like your speech, your actions, and your livelihood. There's certain unwholesome conduct that we're all doing prior to eliminating this fetter, where we're putting out certain harm through our speech, our actions, and our livelihood. And we may not even realize that we're doing it. We might think we have all the best intentions in the world, we're doing all the best things, but all these problems keep happening in our life over and over and over again. So in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment and eradicate one portion of this fetter, you need to be able to clean up your moral conduct to the point that you see in the Eightfold Path. So in the Eightfold Path around speech, the Buddha teaches eliminating lying, eliminating slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. So those are the first four that you need to eliminate for right speech. There's deeper teaching on right speech, which is the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and that integrates into the Eightfold Path. But in terms of eliminating this fetter, you just need to eliminate those first 4, because those are all based in craving. And you're going to need the mental discipline to be able to help you do that. But that's what the Buddha is talking about here in terms of eliminating wrong behavior, is the speech is those 4. Then the same thing with right action, eliminating the killing, the stealing, and the sexual misconduct. You need to eliminate those 3 in order to eliminate this particular wrong behavior. And then the same thing with your livelihood. You need to be able to eliminate doing business in weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. And then you need to purify your livelihood in terms of not scheming, not flattering, belittling, hinting, or pursuing gain with gain. Those are things that I showed you yesterday, and they're in the book in chapter 5, volume 1, chapter 5. You can see the first fold of purification for your right livelihood. So when you purify your moral conduct through speech, action, and livelihood, you're causing a significantly less amount of harm in the world through your moral conduct. And then this is why you're going to see improvement to the condition of your mind. Because if you ever lay awake at night and thinking, what did I say to that person? Why did I do that? That's not right. I shouldn't have did that. And you might have like turmoil over what it is that you're doing in the world. By the time you understand the natural law of karma and you've purified your moral conduct, you won't have those sleepless nights where you're worried about what you said to one person or another, because you'll just know with 100% certainty that you're speaking with right speech and you're not causing harm through your speech. If that person got angry or mad, you know that it wasn't from your speech, it was from their craving, because you'll know that it's been 6 months, a year, 2 years, you've been using right speech for all this time, and 99.9% of your conversations go just fine. But this person that is getting angry, that's their craving. It's not you that's causing that, right? So you'll rest easier knowing that your moral conduct has been improved. And then you'll see less and less of these things coming back to you, because as you're decreasing your unwholesome moral conduct and increasing your wholesome moral conduct, people around you will be practicing more and more moral conduct with you as well, wholesome moral conduct. You'll see right now, if you speak harsh and aggressive with people, people speak that way with you. But if you eliminate that for an extended period of time, then less and less people will be speaking that way with you. So getting rid of wrong behavior is going to help your mind be more at ease, more peaceful, more joyful, because you know you're not causing harm to others, but also you're going to see less and less harm coming back to you because you're not causing harm in the world. What wrong observances are, these are the rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, thinking that these are going to produce enlightenment or produce spiritual growth. Whether you choose to do these things are up to you, right? You might decide that you'd like to go to the church or the synagogue or the mosque or something like this with your family on a family outing or something like this. And they might be doing all kinds of rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship and things like this. But your mind needs to understand that that's not what leads to enlightenment. That in order to get to enlightenment, you need to cultivate wisdom, and rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship doesn't cultivate wisdom. So if your mind understands this and you're choosing not to practice them, okay, you've eliminated this particular aspect of the fetter. But even if you went to church and say your family or friends were doing these kinds of things and you were, singing along with them and, praising God at a church or something like this on Christmas Eve or something like this, it's not like your mind automatically has this fetter. Your mind knows, okay, I'm singing, I'm having fun, I'm spending time with my family. That's the reason why I'm doing this. It's a social outing. But like this by itself isn't going to produce wisdom in my mind to be able to live a better way of life. So the Buddha never taught any rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship whatsoever. You'll see those things oftentimes associated with Buddhism because there'll be even ordained practitioners that are practicing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. But this is just because they haven't studied the original teachings to know that those things aren't part of the original teachings. So when we see these kinds of things happening in the world, we don't need to judge other people. We don't need to look down on them. It's just where they are in their practice. I used to do those kinds of things. I used to perform those kinds of things, rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship when I was back in America and I was teaching Thai massage. I used to do some of these things and perform some of those things. But when I started learning that these don't lead to enlightenment, that's when I stopped doing all of that stuff because it was pointless. It didn't make sense. So that's why you don't see any of that stuff here. Even the chanting that we're doing, that's not rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. It's just easing the mind into meditation, getting more awareness of the mind and awareness of the breath. So this is the wrong behavior and observances. And eliminating this, the mind will now be in the first stage of enlightenment if you've eliminated personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. Do you guys have any questions on any of these three? Those of you guys online, you can ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand and ask any questions that you like. Steve has a question.
Thank you, David. On the personal existence view, when it comes to like maintaining good health, I know the body's impermanent, but I know that if I do a certain degree of exercise, my health is going to be better. Mm-hmm. Or if I take a few supplements here and there. Like, is there a middle way here of how to navigate this? Or
yeah, it's the understanding that this body isn't you, but the mind is inhabiting this body, and it's wise to take care of it and make sure it's healthy, because the body's going to feel more comfortable in the world. So that's where wise decision making comes in. Everything that the Buddha taught is based in discernment or wise decision making. So it's a matter of the mind understanding to not define who you are as a person through this body, while understanding that the mind is inhabiting this body, and let's take care of it and make sure that it's healthy. So just like you're not interested in defining yourself, like if you have a little bit extra fat, that this is who you are, but also say you're really fit and you're really muscular, not defining yourself through that either, that I'm doing this out of wise decision making to extend my life and to enjoy life and have a more comfortable life because the body is more healthy. Because sometimes we can become arrogant and prideful and boastful because maybe we look really good, maybe we have a six-pack or something like this, and now we cling to that thinking that that's who we are, that we're this six-pack, and now look at us, aren't we so great, walking around with our shirt off, right? Or showing our six-pack. So whether you're experiencing any kind of fat or even a really, really healthy body, not defining that that's who you are. And if you would like to exercise or take supplements or eat healthy food and those kinds of things to maintain the body and be healthy, that's wonderful ideas. Those are all wise things to be able to do. And the Buddha taught to take care of this body, and because you're inhabiting it. And if you have a healthy body, you're going to have a more comfortable existence. By the way, the personal existence view is part of the ego. It's not the entire ego, but it's part of it. That's why, you can have ego and arrogance around how you look or certain things in the mind and things like that. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So I'm going to move on to the next fetter, which is sensual desire. This is a really strong fetter. This is one that when we talk about craving, desire, attachment, this is where it's coming from. What sensual desire is sensual desire is where the mind is longing and yearning through the sense bases. What the sense bases are the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body itself, and then the mind. There's these 6 sense bases, and the mind wants permanently agreeable contact through these 6 sense bases. Anytime you're experiencing discontentedness, it's going to be some type of agreeable or disagreeable contact through the sense bases. So for example, if you look outside through your eyes and you see the sun, and that's agreeable to you, you'll get very excited and very happy. But now when you look out through your eyes and you see it's raining, now you're seeing something through the eyes that is disagreeable to you, which is the rain. And now you're going to be upset and frustrated or agitated. Or say you're walking down the street and you see a mom and a dad holding the hand of their child. And it's like, this is so nice. They're walking down the street holding hands. That's so beautiful. Look at that. And you get so excited. But then you turn the corner and you see a parent slap their child across their face. Oh my goodness, that's disagreeable to you maybe, right? So now the mind's going to experience discontentedness, either conditioned pleasant feelings or painful feelings based on something that you're seeing. And the same thing's happening with all the other sense bases, like the ears. Say you pull up to a traffic light and somebody next to you in the car is playing some music that you find agreeable. You're like, yeah, all right, that's my jam. Yeah, let's go. Come on. All right. Yeah, I like that music. But now you pull up to the next light and someone's got some disagreeable music. And now you're like, man, that guy's playing bad music. Honk, honk, honk. Right? You're frustrated and agitated. That's because of the sensual desire. The mind is longing, yearning through the sense bases, wanting things to be permanently agreeable, but yet you live in an impermanent world and you can't control all this impermanence around you, that you're going to experience these things that are agreeable and disagreeable. By the time you eliminate sensual desire, there's no longer agreeable or disagreeable. It's just contact. It's just a sound. It's not good music or bad music. It's just music. That's all it is. But when you have craving in your mind, there's going to be good music and bad music, right? That's the way the mind's going to perceive it because of its cravings. And it's doing this with all the sense bases, like the nose. You might be walking down the street or walking at the mall and you smell someone's perfume or cologne. Oh, she smells good. Or he smells good, right? But then you're walking down the street and you smell the sewer. Oh, that's horrible. The mind's repulsed by it because it smells something disagreeable. When the mind needs to just understand, hey, this is impermanent. You're going to smell it for 10 seconds and then it's going to be gone. Just like the pleasurable thing, just like the agreeable thing. It's just going to be a 5 or 10 second momentary experience. It's impermanent. No need to grasp onto it and cling to it. You'll know when you eliminate sensual desire, you'll know something smells, wow, that smells quite nice. Or, oh, that doesn't smell so great. You'll know that, but your mind won't be repulsed by it and it won't be clinging and craving to it when it smells good. Same thing with the tongue. There's certain foods that you eat that you find agreeable and you really get pleasant feelings when you eat those things. But then when you have other foods, then your mind's repulsed by it and you're maybe disgusted by this food and you might try to push it away, right? And then the same thing with the body. There's certain fabrics maybe that are touch the body, or maybe you walk down the street and when you're walking down the street all by yourself, you feel really great because that's agreeable to you. But then when someone bumps into you, now you feel angry and you feel frustrated. Maybe you're ready to fight this person because they stepped on your shoe or they hit you in your shoulder as you were walking down the street. This is bodily contact, that the mind is craving this permanently agreeable contact. When you live in an impermanent world, you're going to bump into people and people are going to bump into you sometimes. This is just the nature of existing in the world. This is all impermanence. And then there's the mind itself. This is the sixth sense base. If you've ever been in the present moment, and you've been thinking about the past, about something really pleasurable that's happened in the past, something really amazing, and you get conditioned pleasant feelings now in the present moment based on things that happened in the past, this is because of the sixth sense base. There hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or body. It's just what's going on in the mind. But you can also be thinking about the past and very painful things that happened in the past. And now in the present moment, you're having painful feelings based on things that happened in the past. We call this trauma, right? But what really is happening is the mind is just clinging. It's holding on to an experience. It's holding on to things that happened in the past. And now you're forming feelings in the present moment based on things that happened in the past. So you can let these things go. You don't need to form feelings in the present moment based on things that happened in the past. But with sensual desire, your mind's going to be longing and yearning and looking for all those pleasurable things that you experienced in the past or even in the future. If you've ever been at work before and you've been thinking about this vacation that you're going to be taking 3 months from now, and you're getting so excited about this vacation that you're about to take, there hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or body, but it's that sixth sense base of the mind longing and yearning for that holiday, and now you're getting pleasant feelings in the present moment. But then when you have to come back to work after your vacation, I have to go back to work, and you might dread it, right? Because this is the up and down of the mind. So the sensual desire is motivating all these kinds of things. That craving, desire, attachment, wants, expectations that we talk about generally when you're learning the Four Noble Truths and when we teach you other things, that's what we're referring to as the fetter of sensual desire. The way that you eliminate it is with breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and generosity. These are the two that are really targeting it the most. But then you need to guard the mind with right mindfulness, those 4 foundations of mindfulness. The Buddha talks about mindfulness as a guard, that you're guarding the mind. Because anytime you see the mind go up or you see the mind go down, you need to take action to cut it off and let it go. So your mindfulness is like a guard. It's like a security guard. We call the 6 sense bases the doorways to discontentedness. Because anytime you become discontent, it's coming through one of those doorways. This is why sometimes when you're really stressed and you just close your eyes, you feel more calm because you're shutting down one of your doorways and there's less contact coming through the eyes. So this is one of the ways that you might calm yourself down. So if you're guarding the doorways to discontentedness with your mindfulness, when you're noticing discontentedness starting to arise, one of the things that you can do is just choose to walk away. So say you're in a conversation and say you're noticing the frustration starting to arise. That's your sensual desire because you're hearing something that you don't want to hear. It's disagreeable to you. Rather than stay in that situation, you're guarding the mind with mindfulness. You're guarding your doorways. You can walk away because you understand that it's contact with this sound that's causing the central desire to arise. And this is where you can take action to walk away and now protect your doorways. You go away for 5 minutes, you go away for an hour or two or a day or two, and now you can come back and talk to that person rather than being unskillful in that moment, allowing the mind to be frustrated and agitated and annoyed and yelling and hollering and screaming at them. Being hostile, this isn't going to solve anything. This is part of the problem. This is just producing unwholesome results in your life. So if you understand central desire and you've been training your mind with breathing mindfulness meditation and you're training your mind with generosity, more and more your mind will be able to let go. So in the moment when you're practicing your mindfulness and awareness of mind, when you're noticing the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness arising, you should be able to let go and walk away if that's what you need to do. Or redirect your mind. If you're watching the news and you notice the frustration starting to arise, you can cut it off, or you can get up and walk away. But if you're holding on, if you're clinging, you're craving, you're not going to be able to let go. So you need to be able to let go and walk away. So that's where the mindfulness is going to help you. But if you didn't have the proactive training of the breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity there, it's going to be very hard to let go in the moment. So removing this central desire from the mind is to cut off and let go of the bodily sensations associated with the cravings, desires, attachments. As I mentioned yesterday, if you can become aware of those bodily sensations that are arising before the pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant, and easily cut it off there, your mind is very close to enlightenment. It's not going to be in the next week or two or the month or two, but within the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you're going to be experiencing enlightenment. Because if your mind has developed the ability to notice the bodily sensations and be able to easily cut them off and let them go at that point, you're very close to enlightenment. Even the Buddha says this himself. Okay, so this is how you eliminate the central desires through these things. And through eliminating central desire, it will actually help you eliminate ill will, but you do need to go in and actually eliminate ill will too. But with less cravings, you'll automatically have less ill will. This is the fifth fetter. Ill will is the bitterness, the hostility, the aggression, the harshness, the resentment. That's coming through in your intention, speech, and actions. It's happening inside the mind because the mind's polluted, but then it's coming out through your unskillful conduct. And then when it comes out through your unskillful conduct, now you're damaging the relationships because your speech and your actions are being bitter and harsh and hostile. So by you transforming your mind and getting rid of this ill will, you'll be able to be more loving and kind in your relationships. So it requires you to eliminate your central desire where you're wanting mom to be a certain way, or brother or sister or dad or friends or family or coworkers. You need to eliminate that central desire. By bringing that down, it's going to automatically work to eliminate some of your ill will. But there is some ill will in there that's been formed. We didn't have this when we were babies, like I was talking about yesterday. We didn't have ill will. We didn't go into the nursery at the hospital hating other babies, right? We didn't have that. But over time, because of our misunderstanding, because of our lack of wisdom, when our central desires weren't getting fulfilled, we attributed those painful feelings that we experienced to something external. We thought it was mom and dad who were so bad. We thought it was brother and sister or boyfriend or girlfriend or boss. And we started hating other people because we thought that those painful feelings we were experiencing was coming from them. So because of our lack of wisdom, we started to experience this ill will, and it got deeply rooted in the mind. So you got to uproot it. So part of uprooting the ill will is to get rid of the central desire. That's part of it. But then you can go in with loving kindness meditation. That's why we started doing that this morning. And I've done that in other courses as well, where you need to regularly be transforming your mind with loving kindness meditation. And that's going to rewire your mind. But now in daily life, you would like to go out through your intentions, speech, and actions, being polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to everybody. And it's the Eightfold Path that's teaching you how to do that through right intention, right speech, and right actions, right? So we might think we have all the best intentions in the world, but if we're not practicing right intention, which is what the Buddha taught based on the natural laws, we don't have the best intentions. Because this is where we can be in a conversation with somebody, we think we have all the best intentions and the conversation blows up. And we don't realize why. We're like, what? I was interested in helping this person. What happened? That's because you weren't practicing right intention, and you weren't practicing right speech, and you weren't practicing right action. So those things emanate from your loving kindness. You're going to need loving kindness. Because if you remember, right intention, there's 3 aspects to it. The intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, which is loving kindness, and the intention of harmlessness. You're not going to be able to practice the intention of non-ill will and the intention of harmlessness if you don't have a tool and technique to cultivate and permeate in the mind the loving kindness. So the loving kindness meditation is to help bring up in the mind this loving kindness so that now you can practice the intention of non-ill will and the intention of harmlessness. If you remember right speech, the Buddha teaches about how to speak gentle and to speak with a mind of loving kindness. That's the 5th factor of the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. But how could you speak with a mind of loving kindness if you don't have a tool or technique to be able to help you cultivate it? So that's what the loving kindness meditation is for. But then you need to take that out in your practice in order to practice through your daily life, through your intention, speech, and actions to be loving and kind. And then, like a lot of these fetters, whenever you see this ill will arising in the mind, the anger, hatred, ill will, and any of the lesser versions as a bodily sensation, cut it off and let it go. That's restraining the mind. That's not allowing the mind to dwell in that anger. Because before your mind gets angry, there's going to be bodily sensations. It's alerting you, hey, you're about to get angry. 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 You're about to get irritated and frustrated. You're going to say something hostile. If you allow that to happen, it's just going to keep doing it. So you're trying to break that. You're trying to rewire the mind. So when you see the bodily sensations associated with any kind of irritation or frustration or any of these things, cut it off and let it go. Don't allow the mind to do that. So while we call it anger, hatred, and ill will, which are pretty strong words, there's lesser versions that are coming from this. The frustration, the agitation, the annoyance, even dislike. If you're in a crowd and you hear someone talking, you're like, I don't like that guy. You've never even met him. Never even met him. You're like, I just don't like the way he talks. I don't like the way he looks, right? Sometimes you might have been in a situation like that where you just irritated at somebody and you never even met him, right? That's your mind having ill will because there's some central desire there. There's something your mind wants and it's not getting it. So now your ill will is arising. So where you see that occurring, cut it off, let it go. That's restraining your mind. Don't allow your mind to sit there and hate on that guy. Don't be a hater, right? Cut that off and let it go. So any questions on central desire or ill will? Steve's got another question.
So the word complacency came up yesterday and again, during today's talk. And obviously if I'm not aware, then I'm just, by definition, I'm not aware, what I'm doing. But the way the complacency is being referred to is that when I do have this awareness, whether it's a bodily sensation or a feeling, and I don't cut it off, that's complacency, is it?
Yeah. Yep. If you're in that large crowd and you see your mind's hating that guy and you just sit there and keep hating him and just like looking at him and scowling at him and all this kind of stuff, that's complacency. Because you got to get to the point where you take action. Because if you keep allowing that to happen, the mind will just keep doing it.
Yes, because sometimes there's a real tension in a lot of these areas where, in plain English, I know this is bad, but I just can't resist it.
Yeah, that's the central desire. The mind's having that desire, wanting this person to be a certain way, and they're not that way. And this is where you can learn to love all beings and appreciate that we're all different, right? Because there's all this impermanence. This is the funny thing about the unenlightened mind. The mind craves permanence in the unenlightened mind, right? We crave for things to be permanent. Can you imagine if the world was truly like that? It would be so boring. Think about if Canada was the same as Thailand or Australia was exactly the same as Thailand. Why would we ever be interested in going anywhere? Because everywhere is the same. Even though the mind craves permanence, if we really got that, we wouldn't like it whatsoever, right? It would be so boring to live in that world. But yet the mind craves for every human being to function a certain way. We want everybody to function the same as us. But if that was truly the way this world was, it would be boring. I appreciate sitting down with you guys and you have different thoughts and different opinions and different experiences and going out in the world and seeing people with different color skin and different color hair and different shoes than me. If everything was permanent in this world the way the mind really wants, it would be horrible, right? We wouldn't really enjoy being in that world, but yet that's what the mind wants. So you can tell yourself sometimes, look how silly you're being, silly mind. Of course that person isn't going to do that thing that you want them to do because you do that thing. Other people don't do that thing. The world is impermanent. So sometimes you can just laugh at yourself and be like, silly mind, what are you doing craving permanence? Of course that guy talks different than you because they're a different person. There's impermanence. And this is the beauty of the world, is that things are so different, right? It's the silly thing about the mind. The other thing, while we're on this topic about how the mind craves permanence, as much as the mind craves permanence, and as I just shared, it would be really boring, I think, to live in a world where everything's the same. Not only that, but the mind craves permanence. It keeps wanting this permanence. And as soon as you train the mind to be comfortable with impermanence, it finally gets what it always wanted, which is permanence. It gets permanent peace. It gets permanent joy, right? So the fact that the mind craves permanence, it can't ever get to it because it lives in this impermanent world. But as soon as you train the mind to be comfortable with impermanence, it finally gets what it was wanting all along, which was permanent peace and permanent joy. That's one of the funny things about this path, is that your mind will finally get what it was always wanting. But you have to train it not to want that anymore. And that's when it will actually accomplish it. All right, so this is the ill will. So if you've eliminated up to this point, which I know none of you have at this point, but if you eliminate up to this point, the mind would be in the third stage of enlightenment. It would be experiencing the non-returner. If you've eliminated number 1, 2, and 3, you're in the first stage of enlightenment. And if you've thinned out number 4 and 5, which is sensual desire and ill will, your mind's in the second stage of enlightenment. So for example, if you're noticing that you're less interested in sexual contact, you've thinned out sensual desire to a certain degree, right? But when you fully eliminate sensual desire and ill will, that's when now you've eliminated all the 5 lower fetters. The mind's in that third stage of enlightenment. But then you'd like to start focusing more on these upper fetters, these higher fetters, in order to get to enlightenment itself. I'm going to talk about 6 and 7 together because they're very similar. Desire for form is where you have a desire to exist in one of the form realms. Like you have a desire to come back into the human realm, or you have a desire to exist in the animal realm, right? You might want to be a bird, or you might want to be a cat or a dog or a horse or something like this. If you have a desire for existence in a form realm, this is desire for form. And then desire for formless is desire to exist in one of the formless realms, hell, afflicted spirits, and heavenly realm. There are people who have a desire to exist in hell, right? And there are people who have a desire to exist in the afflicted spirits. This is like ghost. And then there's plenty of people who have a desire to exist in heaven, because they don't realize this is impermanent. They think it's a permanent existence. So people are desiring and longing and yearning to exist in the heavenly realm. So you need to eliminate the clinging to any of these aggregates, the 5 aggregates, and ultimately get to the point where you don't fear death. Because as long as you're clinging to existence in either the form or formless realms, you're going to fear death. You're not going to want to die. Right? And if you have sensual desire, you're not going to want to die either, because you're holding on to material possessions. So there's a practice which is called reflecting on death, or contemplation of death, where you sit and you close your eyes and you envision that you've died, and you kind of play that out like you're a fly on the wall. Like you kind of like are overseeing the police show up to your parents' house, or maybe a doctor or nurse calling your parents and saying, hey, she's died. You might even think about you've been in a car accident or a plane accident or something like this, and now you watch it. What happens? Your parents are probably going to start crying because they're attached to you, right? And they're starting to plan the funeral and the viewing and all these kinds of things. Your family's coming together, kind of celebrating this or whatever it is. You're not planning for it to happen. You're not aspiring to die, but you're just kind of getting comfortable with this impermanence of this life, because death is going to come visit you. That's the one thing for sure, right? We're all required to die. It's going to come visit you. And it's probably going to come when you're least expecting it. And it's going to sneak up on you. And you can allow that to happen. Or you can confront death on your terms. That's what reflecting on death is, or contemplation of death. You're confronting death on your terms. You're saying, hey, death, I see you over there. I know you're going to come visit me, but you know what? I'm coming to visit you. I'm going to come see you, right? And now you go see death and you're like, hey, I see you there. You're not so bad after all, right? Of course, I need to die. You're like, okay, I see you there, right? You're coming to visit it. And you're going to probably need to do this more than one time. And you might grieve. You might be sad when this is happening. You might even cry as you're thinking about your own death. And this is because the mind's letting go. You're eliminating your clinging and your craving. Ultimately, as you do this 2 or 3 or 4 times over the course of multiple months, you'll eventually do this and you'll be completely peaceful. You're like, yep, I'm going to die. No big deal. Right? When I did this in my early 20s. I did this and I realized if I had died, that there were certain things that I hadn't said to my mom that I would have always regretted not saying, or certain things that I needed to hear from her. So when I did this, I just called her up on the phone. I was like, hey, Mom, I've always been meaning to ask you this, or I've always been meaning to tell you this. And this was one of the beauties, because if I had truly died or she had truly died, I wouldn't have been able to have that conversation. That's the beauty of confronting death on your terms, that it's not sneaking up on you. And now you have to hurry up and do all these things to get your life in order because you've already done that. So when I did this in my early 20s, all the time I spent with her after that, I felt like it was bonus time because I'd already convinced myself that she had died or I had died. And now all this extra time, there was like another 20, 23 years or so, I felt like it was all bonus time. It was all extra time. I did this with my grandmother too, because you can do this for yourself where you envision yourself dying, but you can also do it for other people too. So I would envision my mom had died or my grandmother had died. And now it helps you to eliminate your attachment to those people. Right? So this is how you eliminate your attachment to existing in the form or formless realm, is envision your own death. And like I mentioned, you might grieve and you might be sad. And that's why you need to have the Eightfold Path on board, where you're doing breathing mindfulness meditation and you're doing generosity, because you're going to need something to get your mind back to stability, because you might be shaken up for a few hours or even a few days, right? So this isn't something you're going to do every single day. You might do this once a month or once every 2 months until you get to the point where your mind's completely comfortable with death and you don't fear death anymore. Okay, so this is how you eliminate the desire for form and desire for formless. Then there's conceit. This is the 8th fetter. Conceit is the arrogance, the pride, the judging, the measuring and comparing, that you're either above people or below people. This is judging others, thinking you're superior or inferior to others. This is coming from our animal existences. When we were in the animal realm, we needed to have conceit because we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd. If we didn't know who the matriarch of our herd was, our elephant herd, we wouldn't know where the watering holes were. We wouldn't know where to eat. We wouldn't know where the migration paths are. We needed to know who's the top female in our herd. When we were wolves, we needed to know who the alpha male and alpha female are, because they're teaching us to hunt. And if we didn't know who they were, we wouldn't learn how to hunt and we wouldn't learn how to survive. So when we were in the animal realm, we had all this conceit and we needed it in order to survive. But when we come into the human world, our mind oftentimes retains this. And now it causes us problems, because when you're egotistical around other people, people will tend to push you away. Human beings will push away a person who's egotistical. So if you have a lot of ego, you might find that it's hard to make friends or hard to maintain relationships because people will tend to push you away. So you would like to eliminate this conceit where you're not putting yourself above people or below people. Putting yourself below people is just as harmful to you as putting yourself above. Because when you're putting yourself above people, you're going to talk down to them. But when you put yourself below people, you're going to be shaken up. So like a boss, or maybe like a celebrity or a politician or someone that you look up to, you're going to be shaken up in those situations. You're going to feel nervous and uncalm. And now you're not going to perform well at work. So you would like to be able to view everybody as equal, that you're equal to everybody else and everyone else is equal to you. Sure, the boss is making a lot more money than you. They have a lot more responsibilities than you, but that doesn't mean they're more important than you. They're just performing a different role. Of course, there's a president or prime minister of our country. There's a king in this country. I'm sure that he's doing whatever he needs to do as a king, but that doesn't mean he's any better or any worse than anybody else. If there's someone outside sweeping the streets, they're just as important as the king or the prime minister or somebody else, right? We like to have clean streets. So when you walk down the street, you would like to treat everybody equally. When I see people sweeping the streets, I why them just like I might why an immigration officer at immigration. I'm going to treat everybody with respect, right? And this is helping to humble your mind and bring the mind down to earth and treating everybody equally. So I have a lot of these things here that I usually share to help you understand how to eliminate conceit. But based on the time, I'm going to talk about this when we talk about eliminating the ego. I'm going to walk through each one of these in detail and show you guys what this is. There's a whole bunch of them here. Then there's restlessness. What restlessness is this is a confused, distracted, worried, anxious mind. This is the opposite of singleness of mind. If you ever have been sitting somewhere and you like bob your knee like this is the mind. The body's the employee. The mind is the boss. So you can see that your mind's restless when you're doing this, or you're doing this with your hands. If you're kind of you have this overactive, or you're tapping a pencil or a pen. If you've ever done that a lot, just tap, 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 tap. Or like at one time I used to pull my ear all the time because I had this cartilage in there and it would crack. I used to go crack, 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 or my nose. I used to crack my nose all the time. It's like these repetitive movements where the mind is restless and it's just trying to do something. Or a student recently asked me yesterday that he scratches his fingernails all the time. And he was asking me about that. This is the restlessness of the mind. So you would like to eliminate that. Your breathing mindfulness meditation and your practice of generosity is going to help you eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments. This is what's causing those things, is your mind is craving something and it's not getting it, so it's overactive in that situation. So continuing to do breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity is what will eliminate this. But you need to bring in equanimity, the calmness, the composure, the evenness of temper. And you need to actively apply that with right effort. So whenever you see your mind's overactive, like if I was sitting here bobbing my knee, I would be like, stop. And I would just try to control the body and control the mind and not allow the mind to do that. If I was scratching my fingers a lot or pulling my ear, I'd probably sit on my hands and kind of restrain my mind and force the mind not to be able to do this. I mean, you can't force it, but you would like to gradually train the mind to be able to do this, right? So if you're doing something repetitively with your hands, maybe you need to sit on your hands for a little while. And this is part of restraining your mind, and more your mind will eliminate that craving of doing that repetitive movement. So you're going to need to bring in this calmness and composure, and you're cultivating that through your meditation, but then you need to practice it in daily life, that where you see your mind doing these kind of repetitive things, you're going to have to stop the body and the mind from doing that. So this is restlessness. By the time you've gotten to enlightenment, you've eliminated this. The mind is just completely steady and stable and unshakable. It's not shaken up with this restlessness and this anxiety. And then there's this last one. This is the fetter of all fetters. This is the whole reason why all the other fetters exist. If it wasn't for this one, all the rest of them wouldn't actually exist. It's referred to as ignorance, but as you guys know, I don't usually use that word, but I just use it as because that's what other people use. And if you study other people's teachings, you'll know what they're talking about. People will refer to this as ignorance or delusion, maybe confusion or misunderstanding or misperception. I like to refer to it as the unknowing of true reality or the lack of wisdom, because the mind isn't understanding the way the world truly is. It's not understanding the natural laws. That's what it's ignorant to. That's what it's unknowing of. It doesn't understand the natural laws. And because it doesn't understand these natural laws, the mind continues to experience the same problems over and over and over and over again. This is why the mind just kept getting angry and frustrated over and over and over again, because it never knew what the problem was, because it didn't have exposure to the three universal truths and the Four Noble Truths. This is why we've been bitter and harsh and hostile in the past, because we didn't have the wisdom to realize that that was causing harm to others, and then this harm is just going to come back to us. It was kind of like we were going through life, we were kicking up the sand, and it kept blowing the sand back in our face, and we were like blaming somebody else for the sand being blown back into our face, when in reality it was us the whole time kicking up the sand. Right? And it's this lack of wisdom that we didn't even realize that it was us that was causing all of this. Of course, other people are doing things unwise too. It's not about blame or it's not about fault. It's just about seeing true reality. So when we have wisdom, we can see that, hey, as long as we kick up the sand, it's going to keep blowing back in our face. Let me stop kicking the sand. Right? And once you have that wisdom to stop kicking the sand, then you don't experience sand coming back in your face anymore. So here, getting rid of this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality is to investigate the teachings, seeking guidance from a teacher, getting into the books and the courses and the classes and the retreats, fully developing your life practice on the teachings so that you're not believing the teachings, but you're learning, you're investigating, examining, you're reflecting on them to independently verify them, and then you're practicing them. Because you can intellectually know the teachings, but if you're not practicing them, you still have ignorance in the mind. You still have this unknowing of true reality. Someone might be able to tell you what the 5 precepts are, but if they're not practicing them, they still have ignorance in the mind. So if you're going to eradicate this ignorance, not only do you need to do the intellectual learning in the reflection to see that it's true, but you need to practice it as well. So this is the last fetter of all the fetters to actually get eliminated from the mind. As long as you're doing anything unwise or unwholesome, there's still this unknowing of true reality. The mind hasn't fully cultivated the wisdom yet. So you're cultivating wisdom about countless things when you first get started. The 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, the 3 poisons, meditation training, all these different things that you're learning along the way, the 10 fetters themselves, the Jhānas, the 4 stages of enlightenment, all these things that you're learning. This is all contributing to your development of wisdom. And that's what's going to ultimately be applied in your day-to-day life to transform your mind and move it away from these pollutions. Without the wisdom, you wouldn't be able to transform your mind. So this is why you need help to be able to learn and practice. But then you don't believe those teachings. You examine them, you reflect on them to verify them, and then you practice. And that's what eradicates the ignorance. So any questions on any of these? No questions? Okay. Let's see if we have any questions online. Not seeing any questions online either.
Hi, David. I have a question on trauma. You just mentioned that we need to get rid of the sensual desires and do meditation, or we can practice Eightfold Paths. But I think trauma is something that is really difficult to get through. And many people with traumatic experience, they are in pain or they go to therapists. And I kind of believe that the body keeps the score. If one is wounded, the body keeps the score. So it's really difficult for one to get through trauma. I also kind of believe, or quite believe that if it's hurt or is wounded by a person, best healing may be the relationship. Of course, one can also get healing from like reading books, arts, or nature, also like meditation. So my question is, I think a kind of lack of confidence in my healing just through meditation or these, because maybe it's not lack of confidence, but I think it's really difficult.
Sure, it is difficult. It is challenging. So that's why I'm willing to help you. That's why I'm dedicating the rest of my life to helping people to be able to experience this, because I've had experiences in my past, which people would typically refer to as trauma, but I've been able to let all of that go and train the mind to let it go. So I know what I'm sharing with you is true, that while people have experienced different things in the past that we might refer to as trauma, those things aren't permanent. That just like the body can take on a certain injury, like the body can be injured with the right medicine, the right food and water and shelter, the body will heal itself. It will repair. The same thing with the mind, that the mind can take on a tremendous amount of pain and suffering, but with the right teachings and the right practice, the mind can heal. But with a lack of wisdom, the mind doesn't know how to do that. So because the mind craves permanence, it's the same thing that the mind's holding on, it's clinging. So if you've had, say, physical abuse or sexual abuse or mental abuse or something like this in the past, the mind can cling to this and hold on to it. The same way of saying it's craving permanence is to say that the mind's clinging and it's holding on. So what you're doing is you're training your mind to let go and not to define who you are as a person and what you experience and basing your feelings on those experiences. So while I have memories of the experiences that I had in the past that someone might refer to as trauma. I don't form feelings based on those things any longer because the mind understands that those things are in the past and I don't need to form feelings today based on things that happened in the past. But the mind doesn't know how to do this in the unenlightened state because of its ignorance and knowing of true reality. The mind's holding on and it's having this sensual desire. It's wanting everything to be pleasant and pleasing when that's just not possible. So with the proper teachings, the mind can be trained to let these things go. And it is challenging. I wouldn't say it's easy, but I wouldn't say it's difficult either. But with training, with guidance, with help, with the true teachings that the Buddha shared, someone can experience this complete healing. That's oftentimes how I describe the teachings of the Buddha, is to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt again. And this is what you can ultimately get to. That hurt, that pain that is experienced because of those traumatic experiences, it's not permanent. The mind can be trained to let that go.
Thank you. I think what one can do is, I agree that one can cultivate wisdom. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just going to take you time to learn and grow if you've had any of these experiences. And the beauty is that this is the last struggle of all struggles, right? It's a challenge to be able to get to enlightenment. If it was so easy, everyone in the world would already be enlightened. It's a challenge, and some people might even refer to it as a struggle. The Buddha describes it that way, and he teaches you don't shrink back from the struggle, because when you're struggling, this is because the mind lacks wisdom. There's just certain wisdom that the mind doesn't have. That's why it's struggling. So if you run away from that or you shrink back from that, you're just going to ensure that the struggle continues. Whereas if you walk towards it, like if you turn around and walk towards the struggle, then you can cultivate the wisdom so that when that same type of situation might be occurring in the future, whatever it is, you can make different decisions that lead to different outcomes. But as long as there's a struggle and we don't use that as an opportunity to cultivate wisdom, we're just ensuring that the struggle is going to continue because we don't have the wisdom to overcome that obstacle in the future. So where the mind wants to run away and it thinks it's solving the problem, it really isn't, because it hasn't cultivated the wisdom. So I always encourage students to walk towards the struggle. And walking towards the struggle is to cultivate wisdom. Reach out to your teacher, reach out to other members of the community. Make sure that in any one particular situation where your mind is challenged and having difficulties, that you use it as an opportunity to cultivate wisdom so that in the next situation, you won't encounter the same type of struggle.
Walking towards the struggle is a powerful statement. But what if one lacks the courage or lacks the strength to make the walk?
That's where you need to arise that, right? Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're going to have courage, you're going to have strength. And if you need to reach out to me or a member of the community or multiple members of the community, that's what we're here for, is to support you and encourage you in your journey, but you've got to do the work. So one of the first things is choosing to pick up the book and read, choosing to come to the classes like you do frequently, choosing to do meditation. Day by day, choice by choice, you're gradually making choices that lead closer and closer to enlightenment. So if you don't have courage, or if somebody lacks courage, they can build that over time. It doesn't just come preloaded in the mind. You need to build that and acquire that as you go forward in life. And that's part of transforming the mind.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Kushi?
Yeah, so I had a question on ill will. Can ill will exist without sensual desire, or it's not possible at all?
I'm trying to think. It's not possible. If there's no sensual desire in the mind, then there wouldn't be any ill will. So that's why these two fetters are being extinguished together. They're being reduced and then eliminated together.
Right. So also the deeply rooted ill will, which is from the past, from childhood or from all these years, there is no sensual desire there because it is already there in the mind, the past ill will, which we have collected so far. So is it connected to sensual desire, or it will go away when sensual desire is eliminated?
So sensual desire can exist without ill will, but ill will can't exist without sensual desire. So this is why we're born with sensual desire from the very beginning. This is why we cry when we come out of our mom's womb, because we're craving that permanent comfort. And now we experience this impermanence. So that's why we cry when we come out of the womb. So when we have sensual desire, the mind slowly gets conditioned to have ill will. Because of our ignorance, our mind associates these painful feelings that we're experiencing because of our cravings. Those painful feelings we're experiencing because of our lack of wisdom, our ignorance, we associate these painful feelings with somebody else or something external. So that's where our ill will comes in and it gets formed. So when we eliminate our sensual desire, we need to also be working to break up the ill will at the same time. So you're working on both of these at the same time. So that's why breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation are both being employed together, so that you're breaking these up at the same time. Having less sensual desire will automatically help you have less ill will, but you still need to go in and break up the ill will too, with the loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in daily life.
Okay. And I had one more question. In conceit, there is said that, listen to others teach you wisdom without any interest to teach them back. So even if that wisdom is not true, how to resist to not say them when they are directing this teaching to you? So how to do this thing?
Yeah, so I haven't talked about these yet, but I will when we get to talking about the ego. But since you're asking a question about this one, I'll explain it to you. So what I'm sharing here is not what you should do always. What I'm teaching you is how to eliminate conceit. So say you know that you have a certain amount of conceit and you're looking to become more humble. One of the things that the mind does when it has conceit is when you hear somebody teach something, the mind's going to want to come over the top and say, well, let me show you something. Let me show you what I know. So instead of doing that, like, for example, you can go talk to people and you can ask them questions. And then when they're sharing something with you, just listen to them without any interest of teaching them anything. Even though what they're teaching you, you might know more than that, or you might know that they're sharing something that is not true. What I'm teaching you here in order to eliminate conceit, in order to help you get rid of that, is to just listen. And I'm not saying that you should do that always, right? Because this isn't permanent. It's just to help you eliminate your conceit. That where you see that urge from the mind to come over the top and tell this person something, what I'm sharing with you is restrain the mind and don't allow the mind to do that in that situation where you're working on eliminating conceit. And you would like to do that for an extended period of time. But then in the future, if you're in a situation where somebody's saying something and you know that it's untrue, or you have something that you would like to share with them, there's ways that aren't conceitful for you to be able to do this. So say somebody shares something with you and you know that maybe you know something that's a little bit different, or you know something beyond what it is that they're sharing. A conceited way to do this would be like, oh, well, that's not correct. Let me tell you the right way. This is the way it is, right? And you're trying to come over the top of them. But a non-conceited way to accomplish the same thing would be, okay, I understand your view on that. Are you interested in hearing another perspective? Are you interested in hearing another opinion? And in some cases, they're going to say yes, and then you share it. In some cases, they're going to say no because of impermanence. They're going to sometimes say, no, I'm not interested in your opinion. If you don't have conceit, you'll be completely comfortable with that. If you don't have sensual desire and conceit, you'll be completely comfortable when they say, no, I'm not interested in your opinion. Okay, you can still be peaceful and joyful. But if you have conceit, you'll be angry that they didn't want to listen to you because your ego wants to come over the top and teach them something that you feel like you know. So if you can put your mind in a situation where it's not trying to teach anybody anything, this can help you to eliminate any ego where the mind's having this urge or this craving to come over the top and teach somebody something. But that isn't necessarily the way that I would suggest you do it forever, right? Because that would be permanence. It's just during this time frame where you're working on eliminating conceit. Because you can ask the question, are you interested in hearing another perspective? And in some cases, they'll say yes, some cases they'll say no. And you're going to need to be comfortable either way. So if you can train your mind to be comfortable without even saying that, with just listening, then you'll be able to be completely peaceful and joyful in the future when you might ask them, would you like to hear my thoughts on that?
So in this case, even when they say yes, and I share my whatever opinion I have, but they still are not ready to hear that, or are still trying to teach me something, and that creates an environment of like a debate or something. So yeah.
This is the interesting thing about the ego is you can ask the person, are you interested in hearing a different opinion? And they can sometimes say yes. And within the first 5 seconds of you talking, they're like cutting you off and their ego's trying to jump in there and they don't want to hear what it is that you have to say. And that's where you need to be very observant and very wise. And when you see that, just refrain from talking. So if I do that, if I say, hey, would you like to hear a different opinion? They're like, oh, sure. What do you have to say? If I start talking and then their ego's jumping in, I'd be like, you know what? It's okay. No worries. I need to go over here. We'll talk another time. And I'll just go away. Because if you don't have ego, you should be able to let go of that and just move on and go do something else. But if you have ego, you're going to be like, no, I listen to you. You got to listen to me. You'll start arguing about it. So you got to be observant of that. Even when they say yes, they're interested, their ego may not. This is the interesting thing about the ego. It's a dirty little devil.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. And by the way, I don't teach anybody anything except for my son or my wife or students here, because I've learned, like, trying to go out into the world and try to teach people things in an unsolicited way, that's your own ego trying to do that. So if somebody asks for advice or someone asks for guidance, I will help them. Of course, I'm responsible to teach my son, so I teach him. My wife, she's my life partner, so I need to contribute things to her. But even with her, I will say to her, are you interested in hearing my thoughts on that? Or would you like my input on that? I will typically say that with her, right? That's the best way to do it. Did you have a question, sir? I saw you reaching for a mic. No? Okay. All right. So it's a little bit after 3 o'clock, but I think this was helpful for you guys to go into the details on this. Remember, in August, I'm going to be spending an entire hour on each one of these individual fetters, and sometimes even an hour and a half on some of them, because you need that level of detail around each one of them. But this course is like the course before the retreat. So I'm kind of getting you ready and primed to understand these fetters and start doing a little bit of work on these if you'd like to, depending on where you are in your practice. But then once we get to the retreat, that's where I'll really go into it in a lot more detail. Okay. So tomorrow we're going to start out with our meditation, of course, like we do each day. We're going to do loving kindness meditation, and we're going to have people joining us for the regular Wednesday class like usual. Then I'm going to be teaching you training the mind to acquire concentration and developing singleness of mind in a distracting world, to help you develop focus and concentration. So I'll teach you all about that. Then we'll teach you about dissolving the ego. Ego serves no purpose, helping you eliminate personal existence view and conceit. We're going to talk more about what the ego is, because we haven't really talked about that much. We're going to talk about what the ego is and how to eliminate it. Then after our lunch, we'll do breathing mindfulness meditation, of course. And then we're going to talk about animal to human, the evolution of our consciousness, where you're learning about the cycle of rebirth and how our animal existences have conditioned the unenlightened mind, where you can start identifying these animalistic instincts because you're shedding that in order to become a better and better human being. That's what you're doing on the path to enlightenment, is becoming a better and better human being. But as long as you have these animalistic instincts, we're not animals anymore. We're humans. But the mind in the unenlightened state functions very much like an animal. So by identifying what these things are and starting to shed them, it will actually help you to become this better and better human as you're shedding these fetters. So thank you guys for your questions. Thank you for all you're doing to keep the temple nice and clean. I see you guys cleaning after class. This is very wonderful. Thank you for that. And as you guys need help, just let me know. I'll see you guys perhaps tomorrow. Okay? Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap. See you guys online as well.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.